Yeah, it's been a challenge personally and also for the team. As you guys might know, I'm a school teacher, so I've gone into lockdown in the school holiday period. So I've sort of been at home for nearly 4 weeks now. So that's been a challenge in itself. I had 2 weeks of school holidays at home where I couldn't do too much, and then 2 weeks of back at work now into the second week. It's been challenging getting my school teaching around it, but then also trying to come up with some stimulus for our players who are also in lockdown, particularly the part-time players. So it's challenging, it's frustrating. I think everyone's sort of going through the same sort of thoughts there, but it's nice that I've got a job and I can go to work, and there's a lot of really positive things that I'm quite grateful for. So try and stay on the positive side of life and be really upbeat about it, and try and find solutions for the things that are difficult. So as you know, my name's Ben Gardiner. I live in Botany in Sydney. I work over at Pagewood, school teacher. I have two roles at the school. I'm a maths teacher, and I'm also a year master at that particular school that I work at. So I work with all of the boys in year 10. So dealing with 15 and 16-year-olds all of the time, which is an interesting challenge. At the moment, it's even more interesting because I'm trying to get the boys to get their work done online, which they're not all too happy about. I've got two dogs, which is awesome. I've got two kids that live with me as well. So we're all in lockdown together. They're older kids, so they're grown up now, and one works and one goes to uni, and they've got their partners that live with us as well. So we've got a house full at the moment. So it's a bit of a battle. But yeah, it's quite enjoyable. In a pretty good spot, and just dealing with the challenges of lockdown the best that I can do. Been coaching for a long time now. Basically started back in around about 2002 with the Roosters, and spent about 10 years there with them in different roles in strength and conditioning and also sports science. So I was one of the performance managers over there for a long period of time. That's where I met Ronnie Palmer, and I worked with Ronnie for about 10 years over there. So most of you will know Ronnie quite well. And then I moved to Souths for about 5 or 6 years as well. I was there just before Madge arrived, coaching the under-20s. And then when Madge came across, I moved into a full-time role, worked as an assistant coach with the NRL and also with the under-20s as well. Moved across and coached Norths as part of the relationship with Souths and Norths at the time. And then, moved out of that and back into teaching for a little while. So I've been teaching now and working in coaching part-time for a period of time. Moved in and worked with the New Zealand Kiwis, and I've been working with them for 4 years. Before Madge came in there, I was working with Dave Kidwell, who I've worked with a lot throughout the years. Then Madge came across, so linked up with him again, which was awesome. And then this year, I've got a fairly good relationship with Adam Hartigan through our relationship when he was at the Roosters and I was working at the Bears. So we got to know each other. So he gave me a call when this job came up. And again, it was a great opportunity to link up with Madge and Hardy, who I've worked with both in the past, and to be able to do this and also work in my school teacher role and balance all of that together. And it's just been a good opportunity for me to get into week-to-week coaching and challenge myself since I've only done the NRL New Zealand Kiwi stuff for about 4 years. So being able to get back in and coaching on a week-to-week basis, it's been challenging for myself in regards to balancing that and work along the way. So yeah, that's the life story pretty much in a nutshell, without going into it too much. Yeah, I could probably put it into a few words. I think it's frustrating for them and us as players and staff not really being sure what's going on at the moment with it. But that's the world in general. So, we talked about being really flexible as a group and rolling with the punches there. But the players have been really, really good, and we've worked really hard in the background behind the scenes with the part-time group to make sure that we've kept them connected. And, the guys in the part-time squad love footy, and they wouldn't be doing what they're doing if they didn't love footy, because these guys go to work all day and then turn up for training in the afternoons 2 or 3 times a week and play on the weekend with the full-timers. So we have a really strong part-time group of players that are made up of New South Wales Cup age players, guys that play in the Ron Massey Cup, and also the under-20s team, where there's some guys that we're developing to bring through. And that group is basically made up of probably 14 to 16 players, and it varies depending on where the players are playing each week. But those guys have come together. We're working hard to keep them connected to the NRL guys as well. So we've used Zoom, which is a great tool to try and get the part-timers and the full-timers together and keep them connected. And we've talked about our footy, and we've talked about what's happening with the comp, and about staying ready and making sure that we are ready to jump into footy when it comes back. And I think we're in a pretty good position to do that at the moment. I think that, that's the key to being a high-performing outfit, which we'd like to think that we are. We prepared well in the pre-season. We prepared well for games throughout the year. And I've said to both the full-timers and the part-timers that when footy comes back on, we need to be ready to go and ready to play. And we've put in a lot of effort for the first 15 or 16 rounds to be in the position that we're in. So the players are really keen in particular to make sure that we can maintain the rage when footy comes back on, and we're not just sort of sitting in our comfort chair and going, oh, well, we'll see what happens. We're actually being active and we're being involved. So it's not reactive when we come back. So we're working hard in the background with the part-timers. We're doing a lot of Zoom sessions, which are interesting in themselves, where guys are training individually or with partners if they have a guy in the squad that lives nearby them. So obviously we're having to stick to the regulations that are in place there. And I go down to my local park at Botany and set up my computer and set up the drills, and the boys are provided with a session plan in advance. And what happens there is they set up what's going to happen in the session. They know what's going to happen. And then basically they put their earphones in and put their phones on the ground or on a seat. And I instruct them on the drills. And the conditioning as well is instructed by Chris Watts, our conditioning coach. And we work as a team there with my assistant coaches and myself to give the guys instruction, working on stuff that they can do on their own that's non-contact, to keep them ready for when footy comes back. And at the end of the day, the thing that needs to be looked after mostly is their hand-eye coordination, so that they're not losing that, and their fitness. And then some of the movement patterns around defence we're working really hard on as well, because it's hard to practice defence without actually having to do contact. But at the end of the day, as I said at the start, it's about finding solutions, and we're finding solutions so that we can keep the boys active. So we're doing that twice a week on a Tuesday and Thursday. The boys go away and train 2 other days by themselves with some conditioning components. And then they're doing weights on their own. And a number of the guys have their own setup for a gym at home and all of that sort of stuff, which they've built over the years in their own house. And so the boys are sort of keeping pretty busy. It's pretty much like they're in a normal training regime, except we're not meeting at the ground. We're meeting at our own grounds and having our conversations through earphones and Zoom meetings. So, yeah, it's an interesting way to go. The reserve grade competition is a really interesting competition, and it's a competition that, I think if you haven't coached it before, you can get a bit panicky if you're not going well for a particular period of time. But I was pretty aware that we might take a little bit of time to get going, and it's just the nature of the circumstances. So we have guys that train in the full-time squad, and we basically didn't train with those guys until the session before game one, like literally the day before we played in that very first game against Canberra. So we trained there, and then we jumped on the bus together on I think it was the Sunday, and we travelled down to Canberra. And that was the first time that a number of my staff in particular had met a number of the players. I'd been lucky enough to go to some NRL sessions, so I'd got to know the players myself. But in terms of coaching and bringing players together, it was always going to be some cohesion issues early in the year because of the fact that we hadn't done that. And it was always going to take us a couple of weeks to get going. So we worked pretty hard on it. And we do a lot of things in the background where we bring our full-timers and part-timers together. As I said, we've used video meetings through this period of time, but we've also used video meetings prior to that where we could bring the part-timers and the full-timers together, where we'd get the halves together, or we'd get the hooker, halves and fullback together to prepare us for games. And so a lot of the work that went on in the background was able to bring that connection between the players quicker. And, it took us 2 weeks to get going, but once we got into week 3 and we knew how we wanted to play, we keep things really simple. We try and bring out the boys' best facets of their game and make sure that they feel confident. And, after a couple of rounds, we started to get going. And, it's about, for me, development, engagement and enjoyment. And if we can get those 3 things right, we educate the players and they'll play well and we start to win games. So the winning part is just the outcome. The process is the more important part. If we can get that process right, which we did for a number of games there throughout the year, we'll get a good outcome on the back of it. And then you have the second part of the year where we've had some ups and downs, but obviously we're here to support the NRL side, number one, and that's to push guys up. And I'm really happy to say that I think we've had 6 or 7 guys debut in the NRL that have come through our team this year, and the fact that we've been able to do that makes it quite a successful program to start off with. And then on the back of it, if we can get some wins along the way so that the boys are feeling successful from what they're doing, I think that that's a great part of what we're doing as well. Yeah, it's a real privilege to be part of it. And it's also a real responsibility as well that I take very seriously. And when I took the job on, I spoke at length to Adam Hardigan and to Madge about that particular importance for me, is that we are building a pathway for players coming through. And I'm an interesting part in the pathway, as I've said, because I've got a connection of a number of different groups of players, the NRL players, the 20s players, the part-time reserve graders and the Ron Massey Cup players. So I sort of see our team as a real centre point for all of those groups combining together. So when I first came in, I spoke about the importance of that connection and making sure that the players felt part of a team and all of those sorts of things, as well as part of a club. And I sort of said, if we can get that right, we'll get some success of players coming through our pathway into the NRL. And probably over the last few weeks of the season, we've started to see some of that happening, where we're bringing more players up from the 20s to look after the fact that a number of guys have gone up to the NRL. And those guys that have come up to the 20s are learning their trade, and it's been difficult. And, we haven't been firing as much as a team, but that's part of the process, is bringing those guys in and letting them recognise what it's like to play against NRL level players along the way, and the pace of the game and the physicality of the game. And if we can get that sort of thing right, well, it's going to allow more players to go through and debut. And as I said, we've had a number of players from our team debut, a couple more last week, which was awesome to see. But the more of that we can get happening, the more successful the NRL will be, and then the more successful the process of pathway will be throughout the lower part of the club going into the NRL.